Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined by Chip Minnich, as always. It's another week. It's another, Saturday closer, I guess, to college football kicking off. Just one more Saturday, right? Till like week zero, till we get those, the week zero games.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
A week and a half.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be – it's one of these things where between NFL preseason games and I know that we're going to be talking about some various Big Ten teams, like trying to keep up with the different pieces of news and information that you get on social media. So, yeah, it's very easy to forget the fact that week zero will be a week from this coming Saturday.
Yep. So we're getting there, folks. We're going to talk about 4 different teams today as we continue to kind of just pick through what's going on in Big Ten fall camps, key storylines, things of that nature. Last week we talked about 5 teams and just kind of what was going on there with places like Ohio State and Nebraska, Maryland. We got some new schools we're going to be talking about this week, but we do have something to talk about with Ohio State, which we'll get to in a minute. But first, we're going to start with Rutgers today. The Big Ten Network was there recently. And we kind of talked about this on our Rutgers preview. Like, this is a team that could maybe be better this year on paper, and actually even on the field in terms of their play, but the record may not be as good as last year just because of the schedules. I mean, how do you look at this Rutgers team this year? What were some of your takeaways from the Big Ten, kind of their tour of Rutgers?
Well, Mark, you hit it right on the head. I think it's one of these things where we talked about on a previous episode, the Big Ten Network, they're going to be, I don't want to say that they're going to be over the top in terms of their analysis. I like to think that they kind of like to put things in as optimistic a tone as possible. And I realize we're going to be talking about some other Big Ten teams, not just today, but in future episodes that they really struggle to put a positive spin on it. But the Big Ten Network guys that were there, they essentially said, all right, this is probably with regard to Greg Schiano, his second tour of duty there, this is probably the most talented, the deepest team in terms of depth that Greg Schiano has had since he has been at Rutgers since his return. I guess I'm just going to frame it that way. So that's the positive. The other thing that the Big Ten Network quickly identified is, all right, this schedule is extremely challenging for Rutgers. So that it's almost one of these things where you might be looking at probably the best team that Greg Schiano has fielded since Rutgers joined the Big Ten, and the record may not really adequately reflect that because just of how difficult it is.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They did lose a couple of guys. Kyle Monangai, obviously, a very physical running back, but they had some guys behind him last year that seemed to run nearly as hard and just as effectively when he was unable to go. So they're going to be physical. They're going to be tough. Schiano is one of those guys who always seems to be able to cook up some type of surprise on special teams or trick play or something. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can marry that, kind of with more talent this year and against a tough schedule. But I guess where is this program at for you right now? Or are they, ahead of where you thought they'd be, right about where you thought they'd be, behind where you thought they'd be when, once Schiano came back? Like, how do you kind of grade him so far in his return to Rutgers?
Well, I definitely think that they are right where they should be. I think it's just a challenge. And one thing, and this is not meant as an indictment on Greg Schiano, just the nature of the transfer portal and NIL, that I think Greg Schiano's task is much more difficult. Oh, and by the way, let's throw in 4 teams from the West Coast that are traditionally pretty good. Let's eliminate divisions. So, I mean, I think his challenge is become even more profound the second time around. That being said, that it's going to be imperative for Rutgers, if they want to be in a bowl game, to get, I realize it sounds like a broken record here, but they really need to get up to a really good start in their non-conference. It's not an insurmountable schedule. I mean, I know we looked at it on a previous episode, but the fact that when they open up, and I want to be as polite as I possibly can, they open up on a Thursday against Ohio University. The Bobcats, now they're going through some transition themselves because they had a coaching change in the offseason, but they're the defending Mid-American Conference champions. The very next week, Rutgers hosts Miami of Ohio. Miami was the runner-up, and then they've got Norfolk State. So those should be 3 winnable games. Where it starts to get dicey is they have a Friday night game against Iowa, and Iowa is always good, let alone the fact that the Big Ten Network, they pointed out that they have to go on the road to places such as Illinois. They have to go on the road to Ohio State in November. They finish up their regular season against Penn State. They're going to be hosting Oregon in October. So, I mean, right there's, you're talking about 3 playoff teams. So that's kind of my point, is that this team, if they get off to a good start in their non-conference, they win games against Iowa. If they beat Purdue, I think they're probably going to be in that 6-7 win range at the most. So the record may not reflect it, but it's just the challenge that's in front of them. And I give Greg Schiano a lot of credit. He did not shy away from, on the Big Ten Network coverage of the training camp. He said, we have to start winning these games. He is not backing down from the fact that, we're going on the road to Ohio State. And we finished up the season against Penn State. And he basically is kind of, throwing down the gauntlet to his team. Hey, this is what you guys signed up for. You're playing in arguably the best conference in college football, and you have to show up and be ready to take these guys on, and you have to have confidence in yourself that you can beat these guys.
Yeah, they've had a lot of close calls.
Mm-hmm.
Almost beating Michigan, almost doing this and that, and it just it feels like they need to break through here. I think Schiano's done a really good job, though. Again, here, the program really went downhill after he had left. They went through a couple of coaches. Nothing seemed to really work. I would argue he took over a job that was nearly as bad as the one he took over the first time around. His predecessor or his successors were not able to sort of take the baton and run with it in any meaningful way. So I think if you're a Rutgers fan, yes, maybe you're a little frustrated. Maybe you thought the 9 and 10 win seasons were possible again, but at the end of the day, he's brought them a long way, in my opinion, here in the last few years, and I think they are trending in the right direction. So I'm with you. Obviously, the start's important. I think they got to go 3-0. That OU game's actually sneaky, kind of interesting. I think OU is Ohio U for those of us who live in Ohio. It's not Oklahoma, but it's sneaky where it's like one of those teams where, yes, you should win the game. You're going to have more talent. Ohio U's got a new coach, but yet if you don't take it seriously, if you don't show up ready to go, it's a team that is capable of beating you. So that's going to be maybe a good early litmus test for them. But yeah, you're right. The start's huge here. So we'll see what kind of start he can get off to. You mentioned they'll be going on the road to Ohio State in November. Ohio's an interesting spot. We had a bit of a quarterback talk and some other things we talked about last week with the Buckeyes. This week, it's the offensive line. Ryan Day not committing to a starting 5 yet on that offensive line, and really not committing to the tackle positions mainly. So right now, Ohio State's been cross-training a lot of their tackles. Ethan Onianwa, the transfer from Rice, has worked at left tackle, right tackle, and they've even kind of contemplated him as a potential fit at guard for them. Austin Searveld was a guard last year, has been working at left and right tackle, probably left tackle, if I had to guess there, is where he'll ultimately settle. And then at at right tackle, obviously you had Onyanwa and Saraville working there, but you also have Philip Daniels, the transfer from Minnesota, who I was very high on coming out of high school, and also thought that was a really good, sneaky good pickup for Ohio State in the offseason. He's making a push at right tackle, which would then kick maybe Onyanwa inside. Like, long story short, they don't seem to have their combination yet. Is this good news or bad news as Texas is now less than 3 weeks away?
I'm gonna lean on the side of slightly bad, simply because I would just, this is just me, just the idea of repetition creating comfort and consistency, and not having people set. The fact that, as you alluded to, Mark, there's going to be a brand new quarterback, regardless of whether it's Sane or Keenholz. Now you're disrupting what I guess as a fan going into Ohio State training camp thought was, I don't want to say a completely settled, but reasonably settled group. So that's why I'm going to give it a little bit more towards, okay, it's kind of disconcerting to me. Now, that being said, and you already know this, but Ethan Onyanwa, when he played well against Texas, when he was at Rice, guess what? He was at right tackle. So maybe there's some strategy behind this, that, okay, maybe they believe against Texas he might be better suited. I personally, this is not meant, I never played offensive line, so for me to try to pass judgment on the effectiveness of others playing the position, I really have to acknowledge that and make that completely wide open. But I'm surprised that Austin Saraville, I know that he last year in preseason camp was given reps at tackle. I just would have figured he had solidified himself so much at guard. So obviously they're liking what they see out of Austin Saraville at the most crucial position for the quarterbacks, is knowing that you've got tremendous backside protection against an opposing pass rush. I just think, as far as Philip Daniels, I know that you were extremely high on him. It's encouraging to hear that he has been coming on in training camp to kind of make it a legitimate battle. I guess, a name that you didn't mention that I just kind of took it for granted, going back to the idea of like kind of settled, was I thought Luke Montgomery was a guy that would be more of kind of like an established starter. Like, it sounds to me like the only certainty along the offensive line in terms of like that they know precisely where they're going to line up right now, as it stands, it's Carson Hinsman at center.
Yeah, they're definitely pushing the competition right now. I was a little surprised to kind of how this has played out, I guess. To your point, I was kind of in the boat that, Onyanwa and maybe even Saraville would be the starting tackles. Daniels and Ian Moore, who I think they like as well, would kind of be the backups. And that would keep things relatively, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just kind of relatively simple, I guess. Guys at the positions they're used to playing for the most part, with the exception of Saraville, who they clearly think is their best offensive lineman at this point. But being at practice a few times, seeing the depth they have, I'm not ready to go bad. I'm thinking this may be more of a positive in terms of, I think it may be more of an insight into the depth they perceive they have on the offensive line. I can tell you just from being at practice this year versus last year, the defensive line just crushed the offensive line in practice, especially when the full five weren't out there for the offensive line. When there was anyone other than the five starters out there, and even sometimes when there were the five starters, like the defensive line was just so disruptive. The quarterbacks really couldn't even get rid of the football a lot of times in 11 on 11. I noticed a little bit of a change this year. Like, yes, there are defensive linemen having really good camp. Like Kenyatta Jackson's been amazing. Cade McDonald's been fantastic. I know Edric Houston's been out. I suspect he'll be very good this year. But it felt different when they put their twos in this year at practice. it didn't feel like this, oh my goodness, you're going to get whoever's in their quarterback killed if they're not careful. I know they don't really hit the quarterback, but, stuff happens in practice. So it's like, how is this going to shape out? You can get the running backs, beat up. But the second team offensive line this year looked much better in practice than compared to last year. And so I think feeling how I felt about the Phillip Daniels acquisition, kind of seeing Ian Moore over the years, these are guys who are going to be likely on their two deep. Maybe Phillip Daniels does start at right tackle, who knows? But I get a sense they're in a much better place right now, depth-wise, than they have been in the past. Now,
do you have any concerns about Siereveld as a pass blocker, knowing what you know about his high school career and how limited of an experience he had as a pass protector?
Yeah, like a little bit. Like I kind of want to see it a little more on the edge in live bullets, but honestly, whoever they put out there at left tackle, I'm going to be worried about them blocking Colin Simmons against Texas. So,
right.
Like, there's not really like anyone in college football that I'd be like, oh, this is going to be great going against Colin Simmons. No problem. I think Texas presents a lot of challenges with their front seven. So, yeah, that's going to be a key. Like we've talked about before, the offensive line, the O-line, D-line dynamics in that game are really interesting. The Ohio State Texas game, and are obviously going to be critical in who's going to win that game. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a thing. But if you tell me that Sierveld's going to play guard and Onionwa's the left tackle, I'm still going to say, okay, is he going to be able to handle Colin Simmons? Because obviously, if you can't block him one-on-one, you got to start doubling or chipping. Young quarterback, they're going to be starting a quarterback with 0 college starts. Like, we think it's going to be Sayin. I assume it's going to be Sayin. I'm pretty sure it will be, but there's no experience back there. So this, having to juggle something on the fly in the first game of the season, whether it's how you're protected, how your protections are set up. Do you have to keep running backs in? Do you have to put a tight end in, keep him in? Because you don't want to be keeping in Max Clare.
Correct.
Because that's going to be one of your weapons. So it's like, okay, are you going to see more 2 tight end looks to help with that? Like, there's a lot to sort through for Ohio State on that in terms of how they're going to contain that front seven and Colin Simmons in particular. So, it's kind of my long-winded answer of saying yes, but I don't know that I'm any more concerned if it's Siereveld versus Onionwa, to be honest with you. So I think that's a big key for Ohio State winning that game just in general. So we'll keep an eye on that. I know Ryan Day said, he wants to get his 5 kind of set, or at least probably his 10 is probably his top 10 set, because he wants guys to kind of spend the last, probably 2 weeks of practice at the position they anticipate they're going to be starting at in once the season kicks off. So we'll keep an eye on that. But those are interesting battles that maybe we didn't think were going to happen 2 weeks ago.
Right. And one thing that, something to kind of point out that I'm definitely in favor of, and I applaud the Ohio State offensive line coaching staff, because they the Big Ten Network kind of alluded to the fact that they have 3 offensive line coaches, which is tremendous. I love the fact that Ohio State is cross-training all of their linemen, because, just in recent memory, the fact that, all right, Donovan Jackson, he did a great job. I have no doubt that was certainly it was instrumental in elevating his NFL draft stock. The fact that he had the versatility to play tackle if need be. His best position was at guard. But the fact that, he was thrust into duty, how much more comfortable I would think the Ohio State coaching staff is knowing, not that I want to see this happening, but if Siereveld were to struggle at left tackle, okay, you've got a player in Onionwa who has played tackle. You have Phillip Daniels, who has played tackle. You have Tegra Shabola, who has played guard and played tackle, previously. So I like the fact that they are cross-training at crucial positions along that offensive line.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll find out obviously the Texas game is going to be the season opener. So, we have an idea of things, probably at the end of September once they've played Texas and Washington, kind of where their O-line's trending. If kind of probably do some Monday morning quarterbacking on this whole situation right now, whether they handled it properly. But I just think it's more of a tip of the cap to their depth. That's how I'm reading this right now. There's been years, and I'm really not Ohio State optimist guy in terms of like the offensive line. I've been very critical over the years of their offensive line. So I'd be one of the first people to be like, I don't like this. I don't like what their depth. I don't like what they have here. But being a practice a few times, seeing the different bodies they've got to tackle this year, my instinct here is that this is more tip of the cap to the depth in Phillip Daniels being a very young, talented player who's starting to come on in his first year in the program. But we'll see. Time will tell. Let's go to the state of Indiana.
Okay.
Let's start with the Hoosiers. Huge question here, like, how good is Fernando Mendoza going to be? Because that, for a team that's now ranked in the top 25 in both polls preseason, the expectations are high this year. They kind of came out of nowhere last year, went on that run and got into the playoff. Now everyone's like, well, can they do this again? Was last year a fluke? Was it a soft schedule that allowed them to get in? Were they really one of the 12 best teams? We've heard the questions. I think Fernando Mendoza being a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the Big Ten is going to be the difference between Indiana, being a team that competes again in that, middle of the top 25 area or takes, a step or two back. What do you think? What did the Big Ten guys say? I like Mendoza. I can't say I watched like every game Cal played last year. I'd be lying, but like I've seen enough of him to think I like him. He's certainly there are people out there who really like him, think he could be arguably the best quarterback in the league this year. I don't know if I'm going that far yet, but just what's your sense there? And what did you gather from the Big Ten guys?
I would say that the Big Ten guys are very bullish on Fernando Mendoza. They love that acquisition. They also love the acquisition of Roman Hemby at running back. They believe that's going to pay tremendous dividends. But Mendoza, they raved about in his interviews the fact that he came in. Yeah, he was in the transfer portal, but that he's earned the respect of his teammates. And it was one of these things where it was brought out that by the Big Ten Network guys that, okay, he has emerged naturally as a leader of that team. I'm not saying the leader, but a leader of that team. And his talent on the field is representing himself well. Overall, the vibe of the Big Ten Network was that kind of all right, last year this was coming out of nowhere. And we've talked about this on previous episodes. This is not going to be a shock to anyone within the Big Ten that, okay, you need to really be prepared for Indiana. They did make light of the fact that Indiana, when they beat teams last year, I mean, they didn't just beat them. I mean, they blew teams out. So it's one of these things where this coming year, now say what you will about the soft non-conference schedule. I think that I like the way that Jerry DiNardo, like I said, the way that they put a spin on it is they say those are winnable games instead of just coming out and saying that, okay, Indiana is going to win them. They said those are winnable games. But then they pointed out, when it comes to the schedule, the fact that, all right, Illinois, which I can't wait for that game. I think that's just going to be such a red letter circle day on the calendar to watch how whoever emerges out of that one, that Indiana hosting Illinois, the fact that they go on the road to Kinnick Stadium, which is always tough. They have to go on the road to Oregon. And then, at the end of November, I should say the end of November, beginning of November, go on the road to Penn State. So their schedule is challenging. The fact that, okay, they don't want to be considered a fluke. They don't want to be considered like, a lucky team that made the college football playoff just by virtue of a fortuitous schedule in 2024. They want to earn it. And so there's kind of this disrespect card that the guys at Indiana are kind of internally playing amongst themselves, that, okay, we're not respected by the college football world, and we have to go out and show everyone again that we are a legitimately good program.
Yeah, like I said on previous episodes, and I really like what they did in the portal. I was a big kind of Roman Hemby guy at Maryland. Part of the reason why I'm so bearish on Maryland this year is there's obviously a variety of factors at play there, but I'm like, look, like, you lost so many of your best players. You lost your quarterback, you lost your stud receiver. I think Roman Hemby was better than people thought and gave credit for. I think he'll have a breakout year for Indiana this year. People are like, oh, he's really good. Like, yeah, he is. So I like their ability to. We just said this about Rutgers. They could be as good as they were last year, but not have as good of a record.
That's correct.
So I think they're going to be a really good team, and I do like that backfield. And the more I hear it, like I said, I like Mendoza. There are people who seem to love Mendoza and that have seen more of him than I have. And so it's going to be interesting to see just how quickly that works with the brand new backfield and some other pieces they've kind of put together through the portal, and how quickly that can come together. I think, again, you're getting a little bit of a break there with the schedule in terms of the non-league, so you can kind of gear up and ramp up. But the conference schedule is more difficult this year for them, and so we'll see how they're able to handle that. But I view them as a team who's, probably going to win 8+ games again, and maybe more, depending on, I think, how the breaks go for them, health-wise and everything else. Because, the difference between 10-2 and 8-4, I don't think is quite as big as people think. It's usually a couple plays, a couple injuries or something. So I think they're going to be really good again. We'll see how good. Like I said, I'm going to be fascinated to see where Mendoza stacks up in the Big Ten hierarchy, because I think right now it is wide open. And I know Drew Aller's the guy everyone says is number one, and that's who I would put number one. You got Luke Altmaier in there at 2, and then you got a whole bunch of unknowns. You got your Dante Moores and your Julian Sayans and your Bryce Underwoods, where it's like ultra talented, like 5-star prospects, but how quickly are they going to be really good this year? Or are they going to be, especially someone like Bryce Underwood, who's probably has less infrastructure around him than Julian Sayan or Dante Moore. How quickly are they going to be able to be good enough to carry teams and not just be part of what's going on offense. So going to be a wild year, I think, at quarterback, because it's just, again, the Big Ten quarterback power rankings, I think, could look vastly different at the end of the season than what they might be today if you ranked them today. So that'll be a cool thing, I think, to follow this year. Speaking of quarterbacks, Purdue needs one. Needs to find one. Needs to name one. Ryan Brown, Malachi Singleton continuing to battle it out. Chip, just your general thoughts there. I don't know. Like, Singleton was fairly highly thought of. Transfers from Arkansas, has some mobility to him. Kind of a big athletic dude. Ryan Brown's got some level of experience, not a ton. It's just been okay when he's played. What do you make of that battle, and do you have a personal preference there?
I wouldn't say that I have a personal preference. I think if I was handicapping it, it sounded, based on the Big Ten Network analysis, that Brown is ahead. By no means is it decided that they want to allow for they have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. I want to make that clear, but that it's between Brown and Singleton are the likely candidates to start at the position. But it sounds as though that Brown as a passer is further ahead, and this is not meant to disparage Singleton's athleticism, but Singleton, as you said, his mobility, his running ability gives him a different dimension, but that Brown's passing may be better suited for what they want to do and what they can do right now at Purdue offensively. That it's one of these things where, like I mentioned a few moments ago, that the Big Ten Network, that they try to put an optimistic spin. And it was one of these things where Jerry DiNardo, looking into the camera, said that this might be one of the most extensive rebuilds that they have seen in 19 years at the Big Ten Network that Purdue is undergoing. So it's going to be a challenge. It's they did not shy away from the fact that this was when it comes to Purdue, the fact that they have 51 new players on their roster. I mean, in terms of just the complete when the new coaching staff came in, there were only 40 players that were sitting in that meeting room. I mean, so the sheer amount of talent. You mentioned Max Clare earlier when we were talking about the Ohio State offensive line. Just the sheer amount of talent that left decided that they wanted a different environment. So Purdue has certainly taken advantage of the transfer portal. How well that comes together remains to be seen. But getting back to the gist of your question, I would say right now, probably the likely candidate to start against Ball State when the season kicks off for Purdue on August 30th would probably be Ryan Brown.
This just feels like a situation that could become musical chairs. And I hope it, for Purdue's sake, it doesn't, because it's generally never a good thing. But it doesn't feel like anyone has really taken the bull by the horns yet. I think both guys are big-bodied guys. How much of the QB run do you want to implement this year to kind of I think a great equalizer when you're going into games where you're less talented is having some sort of QB run game in your offense. And so I wonder how much that'll factor in here. Both guys are probably going to be capable of running that, some type of quarterback power or some type of zone read if they wanted to. I know Barry Odom, they chucked it around quite a bit at UNLV, but it's going to be interesting to see just how quickly that comes together, who can kind of grasp the offense, how long is the leash against Ball State. If that's, they're down 7-0 at halftime or 0-0 or 7-3 one way or the other, do they make a move? I'm fascinated to see how this shakes out, because in the era of the transfer portal where quarterbacks it's just revolving door of quarterbacks almost everywhere in the country, I think one of the keys for them is these guys are both younger players. I think they're both sophomores. If they can find one to build around moving forward, you got a couple years with them, hopefully. That's a key. So it's like, how do you manage that in season in terms of trying to ride one guy just to kind of build around him? Or if you do the musical chairs thing, do both of them just transfer at some point after the season because neither one of them feels comfortable with kind of where they stand on the depth chart? This is a very interesting first year for Odom, but this is kind of a thing I think he's got to get right if he wants to turn this around, in some type of quick manner.
Yeah, it's one of these things where when you look at Purdue, as I said a moment ago, that Barry Odom, when he came in, he had 40 guys that this program, in terms of just the revolving door of players that left, the players that have come in. Now, one of the players that I know is familiar to you, just based on your recruiting pedigree, Tony Grimes. Now, he's well-traveled. At cornerback, he started at North Carolina and then he went to UNLV, and now he's one of these guys that is being counted upon at Purdue on the defensive side of the ball. But I mean, and again, I realize I'm trying to make this sound as positively as I possibly can. With Purdue, they have no one returning on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, no players. I mean, it's usually, we talked earlier in the episode about Ohio State with the offensive line, and the fact that they've got a lot of the same players back, but they're just kind of mixing and matching and figuring things out. With Purdue, it's okay. You are truly starting at square one. You are, when it comes to not only these guys are coming in, some from UNLV, some from other locations, but it's going to be a true work in progress.
Yeah, I think Barry Odom's got a very long rebuild ahead of him. I've obviously been fairly bullish on Purdue and Maryland this year in terms of their chances of winning more than a couple of games. But I think I think there should be some optimism here because I do think Barry Odom's a good coach. I think he's a good hire here. And I think this is a different situation. With Maryland, I think it's almost like, okay, just tell us when this era of Mike Loxley is over and let's get some excitement back into this program. Whereas I think Purdue, it's like, yeah, it could be a tough season on the scoreboard in the wins and losses column, but there's likely going to be some hope coming out of the season of Barry Odom starting to maybe make some progress here. He's obviously used the portal. He had to. He's brought in some interesting players. Again, you mentioned Tony Grimes as one. It'll be interesting to see again how quickly can this happen. Can you catch lightning in a bottle? Like, not to the point like Michigan State did with Kenneth Walker, but like, can you catch some lightning in a bottle through the portal where it's like, okay, let's piece this together for a year or two until, the high school recruiting can improve, until, the national profile of Purdue can improve from where it's at right now. But I don't know. I'm curious to see how it goes. Like I said, I'm not expecting a whole lot of wins this year, but I'm curious to see how they look. Do they look like a functional football team? Because you can win like 3 or 4 games. Every team that loses 9 or 10 games is bad, but not every team that loses 9 or 10 games is equal. Some of them are just non-talented teams that they don't have the horses. Purdue was both last year. Purdue lacked talent, although they have, they had Max Clare, they had Dylan Thieneman, who went to Oregon. Like, they had some dudes last year. They didn't look like they knew what they were doing out there. So, like, that's my thing, like, for Purdue. Like, whether you win 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, whatever it is, look like you have a clue of what's going on out there. And that'll be the thing for me to watch this year with them.
They alluded to that, the fact that Barry Odom has done this before. The fact that, okay, this is his 3rd time as a head coach. He was at Missouri. He had a rebuild at UNLV that went well. The fact that, Barry Odom not only at Big Ten Media Days, but, on the broadcast of the Big Ten Network, they made a point of saying this team 3 years ago was in the Big Ten championship game. Now, obviously, a lot has happened since then. Like you said, in terms of the coaching staff that led them to the Big Ten championship game is now at Louisville. A lot of the talent has moved on to other places. But if I had to guess, if there's going to be which side of the ball is going to be the strength of the Purdue team, it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, because that is where Barry Odom's experience. He's more of a defensive coach. The fact that his coaching staff, he brought along Mike Shearer, who's coached with him previously at Arkansas and other places. So they have a good, strong relationship in terms of what they want to do. The fact that some of those players that I mentioned earlier, like Tony Grimes coming from UNLV, have an understanding of the system that Barry Odom would like to run. So by no means am I sitting here saying, oh yeah, like Purdue, like it's going to be a complete, like metamorphosis. It would be great. I think it would be phenomenal if you could have such a thing, at Purdue, happen. But I really just believe that with just the complete disruption of the roster, let alone just an excruciatingly difficult schedule. That was also brought up by the Big Ten Network that, okay, when you get beyond the first 2 non-conference games, I mean, they get to host USC. They get to host USC, and then their final non-conference game is at Notre Dame, who took them behind the woodshed last year. That's not even counting the fact that they're going to be playing at Michigan. They have Ohio State. They have to go on the road to Washington, which is a team that we've talked about very favorably. So I think you and I are in agreement. It's a daunting schedule and challenge for Barry Odom and Purdue. But it's going to be interesting to see how well they mesh all of the transfer portal players as well as any of the true freshmen that they've signed, and try and get Purdue back towards being at least a cohesive and competitive unit.
Yeah, that'll be the good news is for Barry Odom is that the bar isn't high this year. I don't think there's no expectations. Like, he doesn't have to do much to build some momentum in terms of just positive energy from the fans, positive from recruit, because the expectations bottomed out so much under the previous regime that I think, again, if they just look cohesive and win a few games this year, I think people are like, oh, it's a pretty good first season. Like, he doesn't have to come in and win 8 games. So that's I guess a blessing and a curse. You'd like to have more talent. You'd like to have a better schedule, but you'd also, with that said, at least you don't have the crippling expectations this year, and you're able to sort of build it back up, I think, with some patience behind you from the fans, the administration, and everything else. So we shall see. Chip, any parting thoughts?
Just that, when it comes to the Big Ten Network analysis, watching those, I DVR them, I freely admit. It's one of these things where, most of the time watching them, I like the, I'm going to say, the fair-handed way that they try to portray all the teams within the conference. It's getting me more and more excited to see if their respective analysis of the Big Ten teams is going to come to fruition.
Yeah, it'll be, we'll get to look back on our stuff, and it'll only be about a month before we'll have a few games under our belts. We can be like, oh boy, we really missed the boat on that, or why didn't we think that was going to work, or that didn't work, or how do we miss that player, or whatever. But yeah, it's almost here. So looking forward to a great season. The Big Ten, again, I think will be at the forefront of the college football playoff discussion. I think even more so maybe than last year, because I don't know if they'll get 4 in again, but I think they have more teams that will be in the mix. Like last year was kind of 4 and that was it. Like the 4 that got in was kind of it. I mean, Illinois was back there a little bit, but no one really was putting them in the playoff or giving them much of a shot. I think this year you look at the conference, it's like, boy, there's 6 or 7 teams as we kick off the season that might be thinking playoff, but there's only so many spots. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm curious to see, again, our predictions with the breakout teams, our sleeper teams, our disrespected teams. Washington, I don't think, was in the receiving votes in the AP. Did I read that correctly?
You got it.
Teams. They had 25 ranked and then 24 receiving votes. So Washington's like essentially not a top 50 team according to the AP. That sounds insane. So we'll see if Washington proves us right. But so we're getting there. Soon we'll be doing our prediction shows. My gosh.
Absolutely.
We're doing our week. Gosh, do we have anything week 0?
Of Big Ten teams, no.
Yeah, no.
But,
okay.
Yeah, but
maybe we'll hop on and just predict the Iowa State Kansas State game or something, just because we're sickos. But so we're there. We're at the doorstep. So thanks everyone again for watching and listening. We will be back here soon with more Big Ten talk, more fall camp updates. But again, thank you everyone for supporting the channel.